Welcome everyone to the Oakland General Plan Phase 2 Kickoff meeting. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We have interpretation available this evening that I'm going to activate in just 1 second. But to select the language that you would like to hear once I activate it, please click the globe and select which language you would like to hear. For everyone who would like to hear this presentation in English, please make sure that you select English when I enable translation. Clara, could you repeat this message in Spanish, please?
Hola, muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. Esta reunión será interpretada simultáneamente al español. Si desea escuchar la interpretación en español, por favor, diríjase en la barra de tareas en la parte de abajo de su pantalla, de su computadora o tableta, y haga clic en el globo terráneo, en el globito. Después, haga clic otra vez en interpretación y seleccione español. Favor de permanecer en el canal para que no tenga ninguna duda en escuchar la interpretación en español. Si está usando un teléfono inteligente, favor de dirigirse a los 3 puntitos ubicados en la derecha de su pantalla de su teléfono y haga clic en interpretación y clic otra vez en español. Favor de permanecer en este canal. Muchas gracias.
And Agnes, would you please share this message in Cantonese?
多謝你哋係嚟到參加呢一個嘅會議。喺呢一個會議當中，如果你係想要嚟到係選擇口譯服務嘅話，咁你係需要嚟到按一下嗰個嘅口譯，按一下嘅你想要聽嘅語言，咁就係中文 Chinese。咁非必要嘅步驟咧，就係話，如果你係想要聽口譯嘅內容咧，請你按一下關閉原詞音。如果你係響用電話嘅裏邊嚟到係操作嘅話，咁你係需要撳聲6嚟到咧係靜音，聲9咧就係嚟到咧係舉手。唔該 ，Thank you。
All right, and give me 1 second and I will start interpretation. Please select your language at this time. All right, and I see some participants with their hands up. If you could please send your message to the panelists in the chat. We also have an option this evening for question and answers. You can click the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen and ask any questions. Staff will be responding to some questions right now, and then we'll also have a Q&A period in just after the presentation. Okay. So first, before we get started, we have a few words from our Building and Planning Director, Bill Gilchrist. Bill, you want to get us started?
Absolutely. Very happy to get in here, and good evening and welcome to all of you who've made time to be a part of this kickoff and this conversation, initial conversation we're having about the phase 2 of the general plan update for the city of Oakland. Many of you who have participated in this journey with us for the last several years may know that that was really just the beginning of a process that we're undertaking in order to get a better sense of our community, what we would like to see this city do for us as its constituents and its members, what aspirations and hopes we have in terms of the kind of place we'll live in, and to be able to really set some accountability for what those systems are that make a city, our housing, our transportation, our culture, our natural environment. There are many aspects of what we do and how we live. We get a chance now to do a little bit of a pause and have the conversation we need to about what the future of Oakland will be. And the conversation impacts the city at its largest scale, all of Oakland that we claim, and also the characteristics in our own neighborhoods, our streets, with our neighbors, with our parks. There'll be many opportunities for us to engage that discussion, not just with the team at City Hall or the groups that are working with us, but with each other. One of the greatest values I see in these kind of moments is that we get to have the conversation among all of us about what we'd like our city to be. So there is a process, much of which is defined in many of these elements that we'll be talking about by the state. Many of which we get a little bit more clay to mold locally that we can shape and fashion. But by the time we're done, we hope we have a guide for all the things we want to do in terms of our land development, in terms of grants we may apply for our cultural or our environmental opportunities, our sense of place, what we want to conserve and celebrate about what makes us unique. And also how we can give our neighborhoods and communities at their smallest scale a great chance of viability and vitality and identity. So I'm going to turn this over to the team that's going to take us through this in some greater detail. I will be here through the rest of the presentation as well, because I want to learn also through tonight's engagement and look forward to many more conversations we'll be having with all of you. So thank you. And with that, I turn it over to the team.
All right. Great. Thank you so much for that, Bill. So tonight we are excited to officially kick off phase 2 of the Oakland General
Hey,
Plan
Allison.
update. Cleela?
Sharing screen, we see your script and not the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Trying again. There we go. Screen now?
Awesome, thank you.
All right. We'll be sharing background information about what the general plan is, what we did in phase 1, and what we'll be covering in phase 2. We also want to hear from you, and we'll be launching informal audience polls throughout. At the end, we'll have time for you to ask any questions, which you can also add at any time during the presentation using the Q&A feature. We'll also be having a raffle. 2 lucky people who make it to the end of this presentation will be drawn at random for a City of Oakland mug filled with goodies. So to give just a quick introduction to the team, my name is Allison Moore. I'm a planner at Dyett & Bhatia, one of the consulting firms helping the City of Oakland on its general plan update. Various City of Oakland staff are leading the individual phase 2 elements, and they are excited to hear from you. Staff, do you want to give a wave? Great. So before we get into the presentation, I'm wondering, we want to hear from you about what neighborhood you're joining us from. So we're going to launch our first poll. Please select the neighborhood that best represents where you live.
And also please scroll down if you don't see your neighborhood on the poll.
All right, looks like we have a few more, but looks like most of you are joining us from somewhere else, but North Oakland residents leading here. And we'll close this in just 1 second. Okay. We're going to go ahead and end the poll. All right. And we'll share the results here. Great. And before I get into the background of the general plan, we have another poll here. Have you heard of the general plan before? We're hoping that this evening we'll share some background and you can get to know more about what we've done in phase 1 and what phase 2 holds. Yeah, and if you didn't see your neighborhood represented in the map, please just go ahead and let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, or in the chat to us panelists. Great, so it looks like a majority of people are somewhat familiar. They've heard of it and they know a little bit about it. Some people are very familiar, 34%, and 19% not familiar. All right. And here's our results. Oops. Great. So just to share a little bit more about what a general plan is. One second. So the general plan is a policy document that establishes a citywide vision and consistent direction for future development of the city. It reflects community priorities and values and includes supporting goals, policies, and implementation measures to achieve the community's vision. Most of the city's current general plan was developed over 20 years ago. And with this update, the city now has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to advance its commitment to create a fair and just city through its actions. In order to look forward and achieve this goal, we also must reflect, including on the ways that past planning decisions have disproportionately harmed Black Americans, Indigenous groups, people with lower incomes, and other communities of color. This general plan update will be conducted using a racial equity analysis and to identify how proposed policies might affect existing gaps and to identify more equitable approaches. Key to this is engaging and working with our community in the planning and decision-making process. So you may be wondering, how does this general plan affect me? How does it affect Oakland? So the general plan shapes what the city looks like and includes policies on almost every topic that touches our lives. This includes where land uses go, what kind of land uses, how much, equitable locations and development of housing, Oakland's open space, so the number and quality of parks and recreational spaces that we have, making sure that parks are fairly distributed throughout Oakland, for example. Really, what's in your neighborhood? What amenities are there? What's available to you? How do we make that more equitable? Transportation, so it touches how people get around, especially bicyclists, people with disabilities, pedestrians, seniors, as well as people in goods. And then it also affects who's able to stay and thrive in the Oakland economy of the future. Because of state laws around adoption deadlines, the general plan is being carried out in 2 phases, with certain elements that have been adopted earlier than others. In phase 1, we adopted a housing element update, which identifies 3 major goals. The first being to help Oakland produce more housing, especially housing that is affordable to lower income people, protecting tenants and helping people stay in their homes, as well as keeping existing affordable homes affordable. The safety element focuses on protecting Oakland from natural hazards, like earthquakes, wildfire, and others, as well as human-made hazards, like hazardous materials, for example. There are also policies that aim to build resilience to climate change. The city's also adopted Oakland's first environmental justice element that prioritizes improvements and investment in Oakland's environmental justice communities. These are places in Oakland where residents are most burdened by environmental harms,
Usually has to.
health outcomes, and other factors, and this requires the city to address topics like pollution exposure, access to public facilities, food access, healthy homes, physical activity, and civic engagement. Drafts of these documents were informed by a racial equity assessment, which provided data-based recommendations for closing equity gaps. This assessment will also occur for phase 2. And in the next phase, we're going to build upon this work for housing, safety, and environmental justice. And in some cases, we'll take direction from specific actions in the environmental justice and safety elements. The 2045 General Plan Update process includes a robust and multi-pronged strategy for community engagement, including a specific focus on working with communities that have been historically underrepresented and most negatively impacted by city policies. There will be a variety of opportunities to participate and give your input, ranging from presence at existing community celebrations and events, and in-person neighborhood workshops, discussions with groups across the city, meetings with decision makers, as well as online engagement. And we hope that you join us at future events, like next Friday at the Oakland Museum of California. All events will be posted on the city's General Plan Update website. The team also welcomes additional ideas and suggestions on how to engage community. So we really hope that you do get in touch. We have a survey out now that, as part of the initial phase, asking you specifically for input on various phase 2 topics, including land use, transportation, parks, recreation, and more. If you want, you can open the survey using this QR code or follow the link, and we'll also put it in the chat here. So as we get started on phase 2, I'll walk you through the steps for what this process looks like. First, we're going to be building on what we heard in phase 1 and getting additional thoughts on phase 2 issues and strategies. Drawing upon this input, the team will develop what's known as alternatives. Those are high-level concepts for achieving the city's goals. They'll include different land use arrangements and big picture strategies that the community can evaluate and choose which concepts they like the best. Next, we'll combine all of the concepts into a preferred plan, which serves as the foundation for more detailed policies in each element to be developed after that. Then the draft documents will go to decision makers for consideration for adoption in 2026. And at all phases, community engagement will be occurring and will, really serve as the foundation for all of these phases. And the team is committed to developing feedback loops so that people can see how their input was incorporated. So now, as I mentioned, we're at the beginning of phase 2, where we'll be addressing 4 elements: the land use and transportation element, or the LUT, the open space, conservation, and recreation element, or the OSCR, a brand new infrastructure and facilities element, and a noise element. So before I tell you more about what each of these elements will be covering, we have another poll. So which of the phase 2 topics are you most interested in? And if you don't see your interest represented in these choices, you can select something else or send it to your hosts. Right. It's looking like a lot of people are interested in transportation, 70% for neighborhood land use, 51% interested in parks and recreation, infrastructure at 50%. But it looks like what most people are interested in, 71%, is our neighborhood land use. Great. So we'll go ahead and stop sharing and then share our results. So you can see how people voted. Okay, so first, we're going to talk about the LUT element, land use and transportation. So Oakland's existing LUT was last comprehensively updated in 1998, and it included two components, the city structure and identity and a policy framework. The city structure and identity includes kind of a big picture map of Oakland and how it functions. And it divides Oakland into showcase areas like downtown, the waterfront, the Coliseum, and other areas shown in these circles here, as well as transit-oriented districts around BART stations, like here, Oakland's main corridors, and neighborhood activity centers. The features that make up how the city works, so all of these, are then addressed in a policy framework listed in the bullets there. So for example, the industry and policy framework and commerce policy framework includes policies on the Coliseum area, for example. The waterfront policies include the seaport and airport and mixed use waterfront. Since then, several other specific and community plans for distinct areas of Oakland have been developed, including for West Oakland, Lake Merritt, Broadway Valdez, East Oakland neighborhoods, and most recently, the downtown Oakland specific plans. Other important plans guiding Oakland include various transportation plans, the West Oakland Community Action Plan, the Equitable Climate Action Plan, and many others that are not shown here. But we say this because the general plan is not starting from scratch. There is much to build from and many issues and potential strategies that have already been identified in the community are still relevant to this general plan update. What this represents is an opportunity for a refresh to kind of take stock of these efforts, think about how they all work together, and ensure that community priorities and background information is current. This is a map of existing land uses on the ground today, which shows how residential uses, especially single-family residential, makes up the greatest share of the city. Other land uses that take up more space in Oakland include recreation, parks and recreation and open space in the green, and industrial uses in the purple there. And the city's early history has really shaped the pattern of land uses that we see today. And we can see that the greatest mix of use is occurring downtown, along some of the major corridors there. Industrial uses continue to play a major role, especially along the waterfront. But in some cases, we know that these industrial zones, like along San Leandro Street, for example, they're located directly adjacent to residential and community uses. And one of the major tasks of the LUT is to create a pattern that addresses potential land use conflicts, like these that can cause harm, but also build up land uses in neighborhoods to support what people need. So as Oakland looks to the future, we need to be thinking about what our new map looks like. Where and how will Oakland grow and change? What should stay the same? This will involve thinking about how much growth Oakland might see, including housing, people, and jobs. What should land use look like in the face of climate change and a shifting future economy? And then, given the importance of equity, the land use and transportation element also needs to look much more closely at how to meet neighborhood needs and make land use choices that improve and create the conditions that will allow all Oaklanders to thrive. It will also include looking at ways to uplift Oakland's arts, history, and culture and diversity, because these are the things that people say that they love most about the city. As we think about where and how Oakland will grow and change and stay the same, the LUT will also need to address how everything is connected. How do people and goods get from one place to the next, both within neighborhoods, the city as a whole, and beyond? The transportation component of the LUT will address all types of transportation systems, including walking, biking, driving, with a focus on improving system safety, comfort, convenience, and accessibility. And there will also be a particular focus on ways to reduce single occupancy vehicles to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and respond to climate change. So I mentioned a few of these already. But these are some of the big picture questions that we'll be asking. Particularly, we want to be sure that future growth benefits all Oaklanders and does not lead to displacement. So rather than just our, major showcase areas, how do we instead focus land use and policy decisions that support more livable, equitable neighborhoods? What does the future of economic development and jobs look like, and how should we plan for this future? How can we make it easier, safer, and more accessible to get around without a car? And finally, how can we most effectively build upon the work that communities and community leaders have already contributed to and are working every single day? So we have another poll about land use. Which of the following amenities and services are most important to add to your neighborhood? And you can select multiple of these.
And don't forget to scroll on the poll to see all the options.
All right, so I'm seeing grocery stores as number one here. Followed parks and recreational areas, 64% so far. All right, we got a majority here, so we can go ahead and end the poll and share results. So it looks like people want to see grocery stores, restaurants and cafes, parks and recreational areas, cultural and community centers, and more housing. Great, and then we have another poll on transportation that will launch in just a second. Mia, do you want to go ahead and launch the transportation poll? All right, and again, more answers as you scroll down in this poll. And the question is here, what is your top priority for improving transportation in the city? I'll give you a few more seconds on that. Okay, so it looks like top priorities for transportation include improving safety on transit or at stops, improvements that promote walking, so definitely hearing a focus on bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Awesome. All right. Well, next we have our open space conservation and recreation element, or the OSCAR. So this was last updated comprehensively in 1996, and it focused on 4 areas: the function and use of Oakland's open space, ways to conserve natural resources, Oakland's system of parks and recreation, and area-specific improvements. Oakland's OSCAR update will address how to maintain, preserve, and strengthen Oakland's network of open spaces and conserve natural resources. In addition to open space types, the OSCAR will also look at connections and ways to improve access to those places, as well as how to manage and preserve important natural habitat. The OSCAR will also focus on how to build an equitable, well-maintained, and accessible network of parks and recreational facilities that's well distributed throughout the city. This includes developing a system of park types and making sure that these are equitably distributed. It involves exploring mechanisms to maintaining safe and secure parks while everyone feels comfortable and welcome. And then as Oakland becomes more and more built out, it may be harder to find vacant land for new parkland. And so the team will explore ways to co-locate or jointly use parks, playing fields, or other spaces with partners. So in addition to new parkland and maintenance issues, we'll also be asking how the city can bring about a larger network of parks, greenways, and other open green spaces that are well connected to neighborhoods, or even that may be, integrated into the city's bike and pedestrian network. Expansion of Oakland's urban forest will also reap significant benefits for climate resilience, physical activity, and environmental justice, habitat, natural beauty, and other components. And then finally, the city will seek to explore ways to bring back land under Indigenous stewardship. So now we have another poll on Oscar. What would improve your experience most for parks in Oakland? You can go ahead and scroll to see all the choices there too. So it looks like we're seeing park maintenance as the top choice, followed by adding, fixing, or maintaining restrooms, and revitalizing creeks. All right, so we're sharing the results now. So we have park maintenance, improving park safety, providing new parks, and restrooms as our leading choices here. Great. Okay, so next is our infrastructure and public facilities element. This is brand new for the city of Oakland, and this will help the city achieve its longer-term infrastructure goals. And I'll share more about what infrastructure generally encompasses in a second. You may or may not be familiar with the city's capital improvement program, which guides the city's decisions regarding the construction, repair, and replacement of city assets like libraries, public safety facilities, sewers, recreational centers, parks, and street improvements. While the capital improvement program is updated every 2 years, this new element will take a big picture view of these needed improvements over a longer period of time, tied to where and how the city will grow, and will also help to guide shorter term infrastructure decisions as well. So infrastructure and public facilities will need to plan for well-maintained, resilient, and high-quality systems that serve the city, including water, sewage and storm drains, energy, communications, and roadway improvements. It will also need to support an equitably distributed and responsive network of public facilities around the city, including libraries, schools, community centers, public safety facilities, and more. Big picture questions we'll need to ask and answer are how to meet Oakland's existing and future needs. And given that many capital improvements projects are unfunded, how should they be prioritized? And how might the city be able to meet these funding gaps? In the face of climate change, how do we build resilience of our infrastructure networks and public facilities, which are really key to Oaklanders in times of emergency? So another poll for infrastructure and public facilities. Which of the following are most important for you, that the city address in your neighborhood? Okay, so I'm seeing number one by a long shot, roads, bike lanes, and sidewalks. followed by infrastructure related to flooding and water quality, and libraries and learning spaces. All right, so looks like we have a majority, so we'll end the poll and share results. Yeah, so 81% of respondents say roads, bike lanes, and sidewalks are the most in need of improvement in their neighborhoods. All right, and then last, we have our noise element. So Oakland's noise element was last updated in 2005, and it focuses mainly on Oakland's local noise environment. So what are the key drivers of noise in the city, and what are the ways that the city should address land use compatibility? And that is when noisy uses are adjacent to sensitive uses like homes, schools, senior care facilities, and others. And the noise happens in cities, right? It's part of the everyday operation and function of life in a city. But Oakland's noise element will focus on how to minimize the negative effects of noise pollution on health while also promoting a high quality of life. So specifically, it will need to cover noise from roadways, rail, industrial facilities, and airports. Some of the big picture questions we'll need to ask include how the city can protect sensitive uses while still allowing for operation of things needed to help the city run and support jobs. Asking what strategies, requirements, and criteria are needed to help protect sensitive uses. And then how can we also build in ways to support good noises like music and celebrations and festivals as part of urban life here? So this will be, I think, our last poll, but what sources of noise affect you most in your neighborhood? It's looking like a big one so far is freeways and roads. Followed by something else. And I'm seeing in some of the chats to us, it could be noise of living in smaller apartments. Fantastic. All right, so source of noise that affects most of you are freeways and roads, followed by other noises. But thank you so much for taking these polls. All right, so we've reached the end of our presentation here, but I do want to tell you about some next steps, and then Joanna has some words.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the next steps and how they relate to this evening. Thanks, Allison, for explaining what it is that we're going to be working on in phase 2 of the general plan. Tonight is really intended to be our first kickoff of phase 2 to share all of the information about what we're doing. We know there's a lot of content, and we appreciate you sticking with us. But we are going to be moving forward with some more in-person activities. As Allison mentioned, we have on October 4th, we are going to be the featured community table at the Friday nights at the Oakland Museum. So come out there. It's always a really fun time. There will be music and Aztec dancing and all sorts of fun things to do. We'll have activities for kids and adults. So please join us and share your thoughts there. And we will have a whole host of activities. We're going to continue going out to the public like we did in phase 1 with trying to meet people where you all are at various community events and activities. And we're starting with this phase 2 survey that Allison mentioned. So we're going to take all of the information that we got tonight, but we're also going to take all of the information that we get through the survey, which is building on the survey that we one that we had done for phase 1, but incorporating all of the elements of phase 2. So we are really hoping that you will take the survey yourselves and that you will share it with everybody you know. And we'll be sending out more information about that. If you go to the website, which is listed here, and we can drop the link to that as well as the survey in the chat again. You can sign up for our mailing list, so you'll know about the events that are coming up. And you'll also find out about surveys and other documents that we produce throughout the course of the process. So we really hope that you will stay tuned. We are moving into a question and answer section now, so we would love it if you stayed for that. But also just wanted to make one note on the neighborhoods. I know a lot of you did not see your neighborhoods represented in the poll question. And the poll question did cover all of the areas of Oakland, but we know that you all have very different ideas of what your neighborhoods are named, what the boundaries are, and we would really love to hear so that we make sure that all of the neighborhoods do get represented in the general plan and in all of our outreach and engagement. So we've just dropped the website in the chat, and I will turn it back to Allison, who will facilitate the Q&A session, but we have a whole team of city staff here who are available to answer the questions.
Great, thank you, Joanna. So staff have been answering some questions that we've received in the Q&A, but we also want to turn the floor over to you now. You've been very patient with me and hear from you about any questions that you may have about the process, the content of phase 2, anything like that. We're hoping that you can limit your question time to 1 minute. As Joanna mentioned, there will be many other opportunities to share your thoughts and ideas, including the survey that's out now. We definitely won't get to everyone and answer every question here this evening, but staff will respond to any questions that aren't answered in a follow-up summary.
Allison, do you want to move back to the timeline slide so that we could answer that question live?
Sure, the timeline slide. This one? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call on people who have their hands up now. And then if staff see any questions that they would like to respond to live, we can also do that. Donna, you have your hand up. I'm going to allow you to talk now. Go ahead and ask your question. Donna, we can't hear you if you're speaking. I'm still not hearing anything. And it looks like your audio may be muted.
Perhaps we can go to the next person.
All
And
right.
then, Daniel, if you want to put your question in the Q&A, you can. If not, we'll try to come back to you after we go through the hands up.
Kay, how about you?
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering how the environmental justice element will be used to feed into the different elements, particularly transportation and land use.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the work in phase 2 builds on work in phase 1. And if you're looking through the environmental justice element, you may see a number of policies and actions that say, as part of the LUT, do X, Y, and Z. So for example, I know that there's a policy on looking at land use distributions and patterns as a way to address impacts of air quality. So that will be something that we will be doing as part of phase 2 when we're thinking about the land uses.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Sharifa? Go ahead, Sharifa. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you now.
Perfect. So my question was actually about community engagement, specifically around deeply rooted. In phase 1, CBE worked with you all on deeply rooted, and we gave administrative and public feedback on some of the drafts. And so we were wondering if deeply rooted still exists, because we know that like we've reached out to you on different things like language access, since you all have since you all have been working on phase 2, at least publicly. And so we're wondering what happened to deeply rooted, and if that the community aspect of working with NGOs is or CBOs is still a thing or not, and if you could speak about that.
I'll go ahead and jump in. Let me put my video on. Excuse me. And again, no, it's a great question. And we are still looking at how we're confecting, how we're pulling together the outreach into phase 2. And part of the reason to have even this conversation is to get feedback like this and want to learn from what we did and worked well in phase 1. We're still having conversations with those constituent groups and seeing how we move forward. So we'll certainly keep you all apprised of what those avenues will be. But we definitely value what was done, through all of our work in phase 1 for the outreach. So we'll be getting word out very soon about how we'll be moving forward that addresses your question.
And I can also address the language access piece. We have actually just published a draft set of language guidelines. We wanted to be very clear with what documents will be translating by default so that the public is aware of what is going to be available. And I will drop that link in the chat. So we are building on the city's existing language access plan, but we got some questions about interpretation and translation. And so we have created a set of guidelines specifically for the general plan update in phase 2. And those were just dropped in the chat, as well as the link to the survey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharifa. Joelle, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Thank you. So hello, I live in District 6, which is Eastmont. And, I appreciate this and I really like the poll. So thank you for that. And I've been pretty active in the chat. I just want to point out that often when neighborhoods are linked together, other neighborhoods make decisions. So for a long time, the Coliseum was in District 7, and a lot of decisions were made by that district when they weren't close to the Coliseum. And those things are still happening today. And even, with things like this, it could be other districts or other neighborhoods making decisions for ours. And so it's really important to pay attention to that. And I know a lot of this has existed already, but as you said, you're revisiting, and it's really important to revisit that. A lot of community feedback may not actually be from the community. The other thing is that elders and a lot of people like me won't go places where we might catch COVID, or if we work a lot. So mail is still very, very important. A lot of people aren't digital, and a lot of people won't go in person. So please remember to mail people, especially elders or just, working families can't always have access to this. And if you really want the feedback of the people who are impacted, it's important to get to them in all of the ways that they communicate. So thank you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. One more. And one more
I just want to, I know we got to get through the comments, but I really, Joel, want to thank you for that. And one of the things we always have to be mindful of, like even with the maps that we had in neighborhoods and people seeing themselves are not in it, we're either we're or we're not in it. It's exactly what you're saying. We have to make sure on the ground that we're engaging the community in the way they really engage the city, the neighborhoods, et cetera. So one of the takeaways from this, I'm hoping it's not just about this process, the kind of communication issues you raised, but it needs to inform us of the way we think about the city moving forward. Now that we capture all that in this plan, and whenever specific plans or projects or other things of this nature come up, that we're not confusing district boundaries with where real neighborhoods and communities are focused on interest. It's an excellent point, and it's something we definitely have to both pay attention to here and make sure we keep up with all the work moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And just real quick, one more thing with transportation. I know we want to reduce, but please keep in mind, tripling someone's commute is not going to make, frequency doesn't change the fact that our infrastructure doesn't support commuting. So, please also remember that, you can add more buses. It won't change the 3-hour commute, right? If people have to commute to San Francisco or South Bay or whatever. So, there's that too. But thank you so much for the time. And thank you for, acknowledging my questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Joelle. So we are going to go take a little bit more time just so we get to some more questions. So we'll go till 7:15 if that's all right. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Donna again. See if you're able to talk now, Donna. If not, you can add to the chat. And I will try Jordan. Jordan, right? Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Allison. My name is Jordan. I actually am a land use attorney, and I have several. I already asked this question in the chat, but I was just wondering if someone could give a little bit more specificity on the plan for the Hagenberger corridor. We have several clients who are interested in uses that aren't necessarily permitted there right now in like the commercial zoning. And so I was just wondering if there's an idea of what that may look like in the future.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and Ed, do you have any, or Laura?
Yeah, I was going to answer. Yeah, so that's, something that we will be looking at, as well as looking at, all of the city as we're looking at changes in land use and getting input from, community and businesses and so forth to see what types of changes we might want to make to existing land uses and what's allowed. But that's exactly the type of thing that we're going to be looking at as we do the land use and transportation element.
Great, thank you for that, Laura. Dana, how about you? Go ahead.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi. I had a question about, I'm from District 6, Eastmont neighborhood, and I had previously submitted an idea that was approved by the Capital Improvement Program. And I believe the funding from my proposal for the redesign of the Bancroft medians has funding that comes from Caltrans. So I'm kind of looking for information about how those projects that were approved under the Capital Improvement Program play into the prioritization under the general plan and what equity factors apply to that.
Yeah, Daniel, do you want to take this one?
I can edit. Is there someone actually from DOT that's from the city DOT that's on the call? Otherwise, I think that's something we would probably have to get back to you on, since that's really a Department of Transportation question about, I'm not sure where things are at with that project.
But I think we can
Yeah,
say
but if I may,
generally. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Go ahead, Joanna, because that's what I was going to
Sure. Yeah,
suggest.
so more more generally, we have all of that information from all of the both funded and not yet funded capital improvement projects that the public has given us feedback on over the last few years. And as we're developing the infrastructure and facilities element and the capital plan that will come along with that, it's going to be a combination of looking at what we're anticipating development to be like over the next couple of decades and working backwards from that, but also looking at what we've heard from the public already and what we'll continue to hear from the public as part of the general plan update process. So we're taking all of that feedback into account. It will all go through the racial equity impact assessment process as well. And so, yeah, it's all going to come together in the longer range, this new infrastructure and facilities element. And then the goals and policies in that will help inform the shorter term processes as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just put a little bit on that too. Joanna hit it, and the question you're asking is great. Essentially, we got an inventory of what has already been approved and what's in the hopper. We don't know that they have fully been explored in terms of their land use implications. I mean, one of the examples I'll just offer, we can all look at the bus rapid transit corridor up and down International, and there's probably tremendous potential that can render that has not been realized yet for those communities. So one of the things that we get to do is not just look at capital projects or transportation projects in isolation. We get to really think more broadly about what they can bring for value in the community in areas we may not have thought. So we also, through the exercise, like Joanna just said, will come up with new ideas and for capital projects we haven't thought about. And one of the advantages, I think, practically speaking, of doing this kind of plan and hitting the very point you raised, is that when we have these projects in a long-range plan and we go to the federal US DOT, or we go to HUD, or we go to EPA, or to Bloomberg, any kind of greater community foundation, and we show that these plans have these projects in them and they're bringing greater value than just the shovel value of the project, but they have an impact, that usually moves you right to the head of the line in terms of getting funding. And I say this from experience, my time in New Orleans post-Katrina, having plans together made all the difference in the world for our receipt of funding and support. So it's a very important point you're raising, and it's something we want to lean in on with this infrastructure and capital facilities element. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think I have another question, but I can just submit that offline. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Dana. Naomi, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I want to ask a reality question. In some of the other specific plans and in the housing element as well, there are dreams of tasks that the city staff will undertake that there is not enough staff to do. And so I want to know where in the process is the reality check when we make our big lists of tasks and things that we're going to carry out, whether they are actually feasible and in what number of years, decades, or centuries.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Naomi. So as part of the element development, we'll also need to put together an implementation plan with dates and with responsible departments that will be leading whatever that action is. And so that, that process will kind of force a realistic assessment of what is doable, where more resources are needed, et cetera. And then the general plan also needs to be reported on its progress. There's a policy in the environmental justice element about monitoring how policies are being implemented. So in that way, the accountability for some of these policies and actions is built in. Bill and then Lakshmi.
I'll let Lakshmi go first. I was going to jump in, but Lakshmi, you go ahead and say what you have to say, then I'll throw in.
So Naomi, to also provide more detail, on top of what Allison did. So as part of the housing element process, we do an annual progress reporting, and we also have to report on the progress of general plan elements and the policies implemented. So we have started reporting on that starting from 2020. Yeah, we just reported on it April 2024, and we'll continue to do that. And similar to what Allison mentioned, we are also tracking implementation of all the other elements, and there are specific timelines and departments associated with it, and we are working to do that.
I'm just going to throw in, Naomi, I appreciate your comment very much, both in terms of you're saying the reality, but managing expectations about what can actually be done. The plan has to be resource tested always in terms of its adoption, but given the timeline we're talking decades out in some of these elements, no plan survives that long just as it's originally written, and you know that. So what's going to happen as part of this process also is a regular review of conditions that change. One of those conditions obviously is going to be available resources for moving forward with specific components of the plan. Again, one of the things I was saying a moment ago is that in terms of funding that we could pursue, again, through foundations, through federal government, through the state, having these elements reified in a plan, whatever, or having the elements of projects or programs reified in a plan goes a long way towards us also being able to leverage resources in. It is absolutely critical. So as we resource test what we're proposing, we also need to see how it moves toward qualification for outside support as well. That may not always come out of the city's budget in terms of dollars that we have here, but it may again be something we leverage with Caltrans, with the Department of the Interior, with HUD. Having those in the plan gets us a long, long way in the advantage of being moved to the top of the list for those considerations as well. So it's all connected. We need to resource test and keep it real. I'm with you 100% on that. But we also need to understand the way we do this is going to open the door for resources that if we don't do it well, will not be available for us.
Thanks, Bill. Alexis and then Colette. Alexis, go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Alexis and I live in West Oakland. Specifically, I'm in the Prescott neighborhood, which is right by 880. One of my main concerns, and I think many of my neighbors have the same concerns, is that the Port of Oakland is often treated as a very separate entity. And that community members that are directly affected by the operations of the port, which by the way includes the seaport, the airport, and also properties along Jack London Square, are cut off from those conversations. And oftentimes, the city kind of operates as though, those properties don't affect nearby residential neighborhoods. And so I'm not sure exactly how we can remedy this, but it needs to be remedied because, as hopefully everybody knows on this call, West Oakland suffers from much higher rates of asthma, cancer, etc., from the air pollution that comes from the port. So yeah, my question is more, how can we make sure that the communities around port operations are highly involved in these conversations, and that the port doesn't just get a pass because they're, a different entity than, the plan normally deals with?
I'll just take a quick pass at it and then defer to the staff. And they are a separate entity in the ways that you offer, absolutely. And this was something I also had to learn when I arrived. But what I also understand is that the general plan update, the land use alignment and conformity, is still something that they have to comply with. I mean, they have certain prerogatives around land use legislation and zoning on property, but the underlying character through the general plan of the land use is something they still have to comport with. And I know we're having conversations with them. There was a question about Hagenberger earlier, and we're in discussions also, they have concerns around that corridor and its efficacy and what'll happen. So we've got tether with them in terms of communication. And then we've also worked in phase one with West Oakland communities as well. We have the environmental justice element, which, as was cited, has action items that we have to follow up on. So we'll be working with the port and leaning in for them to be better neighbors or good neighbors, with the community also. It'll take work, but there's definitely the process we have is leaning in that direction. And I again, I leave that to staff to, complement that with an E, and anything else that needs to be said that I may have missed in that regard.
But I would add that, the general plan, as you said, Bill, they still have to abide by the general plan, and the general plan is adopted by, the City of Oakland's City Council. So that is something, obviously, for you all, when it goes to council, to make sure your voice is heard, because we may hear maybe some opposition from the port potentially, but then that's where you all need to raise your voices during that legislation process to make sure that you are heard as well.
But I will add, we do want folks to raise their voices, but we also know that we need to make extra effort to reach out to the people who are living in those areas that are most impacted by environmental justice issues. So we will be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like what I'm emphasizing is that it can't be done in isolation, meaning if you zone for heavy industrial uses for the Port of Oakland, and that is less than, a tenth of a mile away from extremely residential dense areas that are highly diverse, then, we are on the defensive side of that, right? So, you can't just think of these as, separate neighborhoods or separate areas. Like there's a pollution effect and a land use effect that goes across neighborhoods. And
Thanks, Alexis.
Yeah.
We will definitely take that into account, and we do
So,
that.
okay, but just to be specific, like if you zone industrial right next to residential neighborhoods, that's not something that we want. So,
Thanks,
and
Alexis.
thank you.
We're at time now. I did just want to say that staff will answer any questions that are still open in this, and we'll send around a follow-up email with this and the poll results. But just wanted to thank you all so much for your time. Khalila, do we have our mug winners?
Hi, yes. So the winners are, I'm gonna make sure that I say these names right. So the first person is Angela Janino. And the next person was Owen Mahoney. And so you guys can email journalplan@oaklandca.gov. I'll put the email in the chat to pick it up. Either you can pick it up at the planning offices, or if you did it mailed to you, we could also coordinate that. So I'll put the email in the chat.
Congratulations, winners. Thank you all so much for your wonderful questions. Thank you for caring about your community. Thank you for being involved in this process. Please do share that survey link around with your friends and neighbors. And we really look forward to seeing you at many community engagement events to come. Thank you so much.
Bring friends. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.